So I am Dr. Christine McGennick. I am an organizational psychologist. I am a visitor's professor with Corbin University, and then in my free time, I run Shattered Glass Leadership. And so Shattered Glass Leadership is really an organization that was started in an effort to break down those glass ceilings, right? And glass ceilings apply to women and minorities. And what we're really seeing is some major transition in the workforce right now, right? We are like literally in the middle of a revolution. And it's going to be a really exciting time, but is anybody kind of watching and going, oh, kids these days? You feeling that? I know, you have one that's like a pseudo-adulting. Yeah. That's a really hard phase, right? Because you're like, ugh, get off your phones, don't do that, don't do that. Well, that is literally the equivalent of them looking at you and being like, hey, did you use light switches today? So they don't love that, right? And we would not love that. And so I spent some time over the last few weeks really thinking about how can I add the most value for you today, right? How do I give you a few gold nuggets that you can walk away with and think, the next time I need leadership development, I'm definitely calling Dr. K, right? Because leadership is a practice. It's not something that you're like, check, done, got it off my list. Because the reality is we show up differently in different days, right? We have different skills that sort of surface when we're tired. Anybody here, we had a pandemic? Yeah, so that was fun. And to really drive some of this home, what I want to start with is what I have deemed my sushi crisis of 2020. Has anybody heard that story yet? No. Oh, good. It's the first time for so many in the group. So, February of 2020, I was at the top of my game. I had started my dream job that was a job that I had been working towards for 10 years. It is the job I went and got my doctorate for. And I was like so excited to be working from home for the first time. My animals were my office mates, always a dog person through and through. And it was quiet. And I was like getting lunches done in the middle of the day, and my house was clean, and all these things seemed amazing. And then a week before spring break, they were like, hey, you need to keep your kids home for 2 weeks. And I was like, well, that is inconvenient. You guys see that? Less top of the game. I dropped a few floors is what I call it. Because I was in penthouse brain in February, and then I was inconvenienced. And then I was inconvenienced again. Because they were like, also, they're not coming back to school at all. And I was like, well, that is not ideal. And then they were like, also, we're not starting again in the fall. And I was like, well, that is getting less and less ideal as we move along, right? So I'm starting to operate in one of what I call these lower floors, where I am a little bit more egocentric, acting a little bit more like a teenager, because I'm tired. And so I'm stomping around a little more frequently. And I thought to myself, the only thing that is going to save anybody's life in my house today is the sexy girl roll from Nagoya. So I called them up, and they were like, hey, how can I help you? And I was like, well, you can't do a lot, but you can make me a sexy girl roll and a mango tango and then 5 dishes with noodles. I don't even care what they are. Drove down there, and the doors were locked. And I was like, well, that's weird, because I put an order in and they definitely said it was going to be ready. And so I, like a creeper, walked around the building, knocking on windows, opening, pulling on things. Finally gave up, called them. And they said, well, which location did you call? And I said, well, the one on the Facebook page that says Salem, Oregon. Because I didn't know there was more than one. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's our sister restaurant. And I was like, okay, so where's my sushi? They said, well, it's in Montana.
What? No.
And I was like, you better mean Montana like we have Dallas for you. And this better be a city that I'm just not aware of. Because I can't handle that. It was not a city. Montana is not a city in Oregon, just in case anybody was wondering. I got back in my car and I picked up my phone and I was like, honey, my sushi's in Montana. And he was like, it's okay. We'll figure it out when I get home. Oh, no, we won't. Oh, no, we won't. We are done. solving problems. We are done with the clipboard of fun. We are done with agendas. We are done with signage. We are done. And he goes, honey, you don't seem okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm not okay. Something's gone wrong. And I got home, and he ushered me to the back bedroom, and he was like, I've hidden the children, and I will bring you wine. I will be there in a minute. Right? Smart man.
Yes.
Right? Smart man. That was the moment that I realized how important recalibrating in our leadership practice becomes on a regular basis. And this is what happens. There's 4 personality types that really start to surface that we see. And I actually put them back there so you can take pictures if you want. And those stickers are actually my online assessment if you want to take the assessment for free. But I have my way, nice way, fun way, and right way. And when we are born, we have no floors. We only have survival mode, right? And then as we grow, as we have experiences, we get 2 floors maybe. And that's what I call the red zone in adulthood. Because we are not immune from behaving like toddlers. We're not, turns out. And so in that red zone, we will see my ways really get rooted in their stubbornness. It's interesting because I watch my children and I kind of go, oh crap, I've got 2 that are just like me. Whoops. Right? Because there's not enough room in our house for 3 my ways. That's just not going to work for us. And so when our my ways get really rooted in self, they become really obstinate. And they become really surrounded by idiots. Right? And you're like, well, I don't think it's me. Right? I'm not the idiot in the room. I don't think I'm the idiot in the room. Now our right ways become really frozen by ambiguity in that second floor, in that red zone. And so when we see them in leadership, they start to go, well, what about this? 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 What size napkins? And you're like, I don't think anybody cares what size napkins we use for the conference. Right? And they're like, we better get it right. So we get stuck in these little minute details. Now our fun ways are my favorite, but they are their living, operating motto is what's the worst that can happen. Now think about that in an adult mode, behaving in that red zone. It's like a toddler. None of us like to be called toddlers, but that red zone, what's the worst that can happen for an adult? That's bad, right? That's when we go to jail as grown-ups. That's jail time, right? And we need those guys in their penthouse brain because they're super innovative. They're like, let's try it, right? Let's try something. They don't need all the answers. They're ready to just go. They are our entrepreneurs to the very core. But they need our right ways to keep them out of jail. Even at that high level, we need that detailed person, that traditions person, that person that goes, did you think about this, right? We need those people. But in that second floor, where that red zone is, that becomes really dangerous, even as an adult. Now, that last one is our nice way. And our nice way has a tendency to be a doormat in that second floor, right? They are super resistant to conflict, and so they become really avoidant. Now, as they sort of evolve, as we get to teenagerhood, we get 6 or 7 floors because we've had more experiences, right? Is everybody following so far? Mm-hmm. And that 6th or 7th or 8th floor, that's what I call the ego zone. That's what I call that yellow zone that we have to watch for as adults, when we start to really operate in ego. Now, you will meet adults that only operate in ego. My theory is that they haven't grown more floors, they haven't maximized their maturity yet, because they've not taken any opportunity to learn from or own their parts of setbacks. Right? You've met those adults, haven't you? Where you're kind of like, not everything happened to you. Some of it you were involved in. Right? And we can't grow, we can't learn, and we can't grow a higher penthouse unless we are owning what we have navigated. Now, I started with that part about the kids these days, right? Kids these days. Well, this is why I wanted to give some of the background, because what we're seeing with Gen Z has a lot of the workforce very concerned. Anybody feeling a little of that? Looking around the room, I feel like I've got a lot of millennials in the group.
Elder millennial.
I know.
You know.
I like that you go with elder because in a lot of writing they're saying geriatric.
Oh, okay.
So that's my favorite.
That's so
Wow.
Right? It's hurtful. It's hurtful. Geriatric millennial here. So elder millennial feels a little kinder. So Gen Z, what we really need to be aware of is those floors, right? Because of all of the major milestones in their lives, they only have 7 or 8 or 9 floors. All those milestones that got interrupted. Now they have capacity to turn into incredible humans. But what we are going to be faced with in the workforce, in the college arena, several of us are sitting in that space, what we are faced with is we have less time now to turn them into bigger grown-ups. And the workforce is demanding more of them because we're paying them so much. Right? So we see these kids as like work babies at 24 years old. And when I say work babies, what I mean is they're literally walking into their very first jobs. The number of students I have that have never worked is shocking to me. Right? Because my boys are like, hey, can I have $5? And I'm like, do I have a PIN code? Oh no, I guess you're gonna have to go do something. Right? And they find themselves fussy. Even my 9-year-old is like, well, I'm not even allowed to have a job. I'm like, there's a chore jar with sticks in it. All the sticks are labeled with a job and a dollar amount. Well, I don't want those ones. Don't care. Not my problem. Those are the ones that you get paid for. And they're the sucky ones, like cleaning the barbecue. Right? You don't get paid for keeping your bedroom clean. That's what you do for living here. Right? Because I feed you every day. I legally am required to, and I can't kennel them. I keep checking it. Which would be way more convenient. That's why I like dogs more than kids. They also are better for my self-esteem. Dogs are also always happy to see me.
Yes.
My kids are like, did you bring pizza? No, there's food in the refrigerator. So it's really important that we recognize that these young adults don't have the years of experience that geriatric millennials had entering the workforce. Many of us as elder millennials started working at 15 years old in some capacity, right? For the neighbors doing something. And then the world started to change and minimum wage increased and we started to go, oh yeah, I'm not paying you that much. You're not worth that much. And then the can got kicked down the road and we stopped hiring 16-year-olds. So now 16-year-olds don't have any work experience, right? And then we kicked that can down the road and now 19-year-olds don't have any experience. And then we kicked that can down the road and now 21-year-olds don't have any experience. I was at the Firefighters Leadership Convention last week speaking, and I'm in a room full of firefighter chiefs from across the Pacific Northwest and up through Alaska. And they're like, what do we do? Do we just start hiring 30 and up? And I was like, you can. That is a choice. And yet, we will just postpone the issue, right? These young adults they haven't had opportunities to practice pseudo-adulting. And we are in a tough spot because nobody wants a 24-year-old to come into work that doesn't know how to start on time. Right? We're kind of like, that's the minimum expectation down here. I should no longer have to teach that. And yet, we are going to have to. Because the other thing that is happening with our youth is our workforce is so desperate for bodies that they're like, it's cool, show up when you want. No, that's not how time works. Don't show up when you want. So at some point in time, we have to shift the paradigm and get these kids back to some basic life skills. And we are going to be responsible for that. And that's stupid. And it's hard. And it's not what we want to spend our time doing. But I promise you the investment and the return on that investment will be huge. Because we also have to remember that Gen Z is incredibly fearful. Gen Z is the post 9/11 generation up to pandemic generation. So stop and think about that for a second. They were around 5 years old when 9/11 happened. And then we're likely going to see the cutoff at the pandemic for Alpha Gen. And the guys, buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to get bumpy. You haven't seen anything yet. Alpha Gen coming in behind Gen Z. Oh boy, boy howdy. It's going to be the most divided, most distrusting generation we've ever seen. But think about all the things we saw in our world from the pandemic to backwards. So from 9/11 to the pandemic. Think about all the things that they saw happen. Now don't think about it from your silly adult brain. Think about it from the kids you have conversations with. From the room, I can tell a lot of you have children or grandchildren, right? And they don't have the perspective or those floors to recognize when something's not catastrophic. They don't have the capacity to recognize when mom and dad go, so this happened just a couple weeks ago. My son was like, hey, can you get me pizza at McDonald's for dinner? And I was like, hey buddy, money's a little tight this week. Papa hasn't been paid yet. So like we're, Papa's dad in Russian, by the way, they're not like grandpa. I'm not waiting for my dad to send me a check. So we're clear, geriatric millennial, totally independent. So I said, money's a little tight this week. We're just going to probably eat what's already in the refrigerator so I don't have to throw food out, right? And so 3 or 4 days later, he bursts into tears and he goes, I think we're going to lose our home, right? No, like I just didn't want to spend $20 on a nasty ass cheeseburger. Right? I just really needed you to put something different in your body, and I didn't want to spend the money to spend as much on DoorDash delivery as the cheeseburger was itself. That's not good money. That's not good math. Right? But his little brain doesn't have the bandwidth to see the difference in the crisis versus like, this is totally normal. It's not even a big deal. Right? And so what we're seeing with Gen Z, this fear we're seeing with Gen Z is because all these major things happen to their tiny little brains. They're uncooked, not finished brains, and they worried about them. And they worried, and they worried, and they worried, and they worried. And they didn't have the words to articulate what was going on, so nobody stopped and went, oh, no. That's not what's happening. We're good. Right? And so now they're moving into adulthood with a deep desire for deep security, but they don't know how to do that. So, all that to say, we have a hard road ahead of us with getting Gen Z up to speed with some basic life skills and expectations, but they are also going to be a really cool generation in their acceptance of diversity. There's some other really cool stuff. Their technology ability to like see a pattern and just like do something new. Had we listened to some of what the elder millennials said when we hit the workforce in 2006, we would have had far more infrastructure in place and been a little more agile when the pandemic happened. Instead, we were like, sit down, sweet pea. Right? That's what we did. And now we're doing the same thing to Gen Z. So what we really need to reframe is what can we learn from them? And how do we absorb that and recognize they have so many less floors than we do. So many less. But they've had a lot of experiences to build those floors if they just have some time and somebody to pour into them. Questions?
How much of the worrying do you think social media impacts?
So much. The social media phenomenon is so big, and part of the challenge is we put all the positive stuff in terms of our lives on social media, and then they're like, it feels so hard. Life feels so hard. And we're like, well, yeah, life is hard. But nobody's putting that out there. Nobody not nobody, because I talk about it all the time. I'm very clear. Like, please don't make me have to wear adult pants today. It's just too much work. Adulting is hard, right? But these kids are only seeing the TikTok version of things in tiny snippets, and they're not recognizing the work that it takes, right? I had a conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago, and they were like, hey, I want to do what you do. It looks fun. And I was like, cool. And they were like, so I'll start next week. 20 years. I'm 20 years into building credibility and education and building my own content and, right? And there's been some hard bumps along the way where I'm like, I'm out, going to McDonald's. Working at McDonald's, I'm out. Adulting's too hard. We need to more frequently share our own speed bumps.
You just said that this Gen Z generation needs someone to pour into them, right? Like, don't you think that part of the crisis is that they really don't have as strong of that network of people pouring into them? Like, I mean, I had, but like I'm guilty of this too, but who am I finding besides my own kids? Because you can only preach at your kids for so long, and they don't listen to you when they reach that age,
Well, yeah,
right?
give it a minute,
So, but like, where can these kids even find someone? I mean, I just talked to Jim today, like, can your daughter, like, pour into my daughter? Like, these kids need someone to, like, inspire them almost.
Yeah, well, you might be surprised at the small things that do impact them. And remember, we don't have to do a lot. Words of affirmation, right? Look at the 5 love languages and ask yourself, what is a 10-cent thing in that space that I can do today? When I say 10 cent, I mean a really small gesture, right? How do I high five? How do I get intentional time about the fist bump? How do I make sure that I'm sending the follow-up email at the end of the day that said, hey, I really appreciated your contribution in X, Y, and Z today. Athletes are getting more of that than kids that aren't doing athletics. But we also need to let our kids know that the world doesn't revolve around them.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like, it's actually really important that we tell them
But they think
that we love them anyway, and you're an idiot. Like, it's really important.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't tell them that they're not the coolest thing since sliced bread, even though for us, maybe they're pretty cool. Not mine. I'm going to be really honest. I have teenage twin boys. They just turned 17, and I cannot wait for them to move out. Get out! People are like, are you going to miss them? Nope.
No.
Nope. We really need to make sure that they know that they're not the best thing in the entire universe, because what we're seeing as these 23-year-olds is it feels like catastrophic failure the first time somebody's like, that wasn't great. Right? And that seems like a totally normal conversation to have and be like, hey, didn't love that. Right? Especially in the workforce, you're like, so that spreadsheet you just sent me had like 97 typos on it. All the math errors, we can't work with that. And they kind of collapse.
Yep.
Because everybody has been telling them they're the best thing that's ever happened to the entire universe. And they're not. None of us are.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, we need to be more visible with our own speed bumps. And we need to encourage the ones 10 years behind us to be more visible with their speed bumps. Because you're right, my 17-year-old boys think I'm a buffoon. Right? So they're not going to listen to me, but they'll listen to somebody 10 years younger than me. That guy's cool.
Yeah.
Right? Not me. Geriatric millennials are the worst.
I'm not clear on the different generations. I'm not even sure which one I'm in, but what's the matter?
Might be silent Jen over there. Okay, so we have 5 active generations in the workforce right now. Silent generation is our president, essentially. So 73 and older is silent generation. Post-silent generation, we had the boomers, which was around 41 to 66-ish. And then we had Gen X, and that was 67 to 81-ish. Now, I'm going to throw out the issues because depending on researchers and where you live, we see bigger cusp windows. So the millennial cusp was a very large cusp because it was a technology evolution that happened there, right? So We had some researchers say millennials start as early as 77, some say as late as 85. I'm like 85. We'll go with that one because then I don't have to identify that way. Instead, I'm a baby Xer. And so the millennial cusp was huge because technology hit rural areas way earlier. Urban areas. I always mix those up. It hit urban first and then slowly spread to rural, right? And so, farm girl, country bumpkin here, like we didn't have computers for longer. And then we definitely didn't have internet for even longer. And so that millennial cusp was really huge, but there's not a cusp for the next generation because it was a hard cultural shift when 9/11 happened, right? It was a clear day and time that our values, and we said, holy crap, we're not invaluable, right? And then we had this like hard line in the sand. We will see that hard line in the sand again with the Gen Alpha, although we might see this weird baby generation because in between the pandemic and today, something else major has happened. Does anybody know what it is? Aside from like recessions and being poor and inflation and all of that?
Well, there's so many.
AI is changing everything real fast. And so the value sets for that generation that's going to be exposed to AI in formative years is going to be very different. And so it will be interesting to see where we actually end up cutting off, or if we say that this is just like a weird pocket generation. I don't know. Other questions?
I have a non-parent here, so I'm not trying to sound judgy, but I feel like kids' lives are scheduled from like dawn till midnight, and then we bemoan the fact that they don't have ability to work, but we've kind of engineered that they don't. And so how do we balance that so they actually get those skills?
It comes from the value sets of the parents, for sure, right? And we do it every time we complain about the generation that we're raising. So yeah, a little bit of a challenge there. I think what we need to do for these kids that are overscheduled is turn over some of those skills, right? Like, I'm navigating young college students that are like, hey, can you do this for me? And I'm like, do I look like your virtual assistant? Right? Because they've had their mom navigating everything forever. And they didn't learn some really important things. My kids are like, oh, I can't believe you're making me put that on the calendar. And I'm like, you can put it on the calendar or you can pay for dinner that I throw away. Those are your choices, sir. Right? So they have to learn the skills that come with adulting. And they can do it being overscheduled. I'm overscheduled all the time. Right? But what we need to do is stop acting like they're executive assistants as parents. Because then they come into the workforce in this weird like, oh, no thank you, I'd like to be a VP. And you're like, that's so cute! That's so cute! Start a company. Right. Other questions?
I got another one.
Yeah.
So you said Alpha Gen is going to be the most divided generation. Can you expand on that? No.
Nope. No, thank you, please. So Alpha Gen, we need to remember, is now the post-pandemic generation, right? And they have navigated formative years. Everybody's watched Inside Out?
Yep.
Core memories, right? Yeah. But core memories is like, I hate the government. I love the government. I hate the government. I love the government. And so we're going to see those two pockets that are very distinctly different. Because of the conversations we've been having in our households, that their tiny brains are trying to absorb and understand. And so we're going to see some really interesting dynamics. Because hate the government also turns to hate authority.
Yeah.
Hate authority turns to my boss is a turd, right? And then my boss is a turd turns into all kinds of other things. Now the other side of that's not any better.
Yeah.
Because what we need to do is critically think and assess people on their character and their ability to like be moral and integrity filled human beings. Bam! Mic drop. Other questions?
We have just a few minutes left before we have to truck up to the bus, but could you tell about some of the things that you provide, business services,
No.
consulting?
Yeah, I do such a bad job of the like, close the sale. Yeah, so I run several women's leadership retreats every summer. I have several seats left in the August one, so that would be an amazing opportunity for any of you here that are anatomically women. That's probably the wrong thing to say. That are women. So then I also do leadership and team building development for small business teams. So anywhere from 6 to 30 people, you can bring them out here for a day-long retreat, do team building. I can do the content and food, or I can come to your office. I can also run stuff virtually. I work with a couple of businesses in town once a month. I go do a 2-hour workshop, and then we revisit the content and see how everybody's applying it, answer questions. So there's a lot of different ways we can sort of divide that content up and build in that leadership practice, because it is a practice. We do things wrong. We say things wrong, right? We do and behave poorly sometimes because we're in toddler mode or that red zone. And so all of those things are options. And then I have several leadership development workbooks back there. I call them uncourses. They're available on Amazon, but they're also available on sale at any point in time when you're on-site activities. So there's Leading Across Generations, Leading in Crisis, Ways to Lead Across Personalities, The Dynamic Leader, and Tactical Leadership. And so you can buy them at discount if you buy a few of them. And then you're welcome to take a pen and a chapstick, and don't forget that sticker for the personality assessment. You'll get on my monthly mailing list that goes out twice a year. So again, terrible at closing. So feel free to grab that sticker, and you can actually take the assessment and find out where you score on the My Way, Fun Way, Nice Way, or Right Way. But that's foundational to most of the work that I do, because each personality has specific decision-making biases that they're most likely to navigate. They have resistance points. They have blind spots from the diagonal personality. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can really learn by learning to cue into who you're possibly talking to. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
I have one. What's the number one quality you look for in a leader that you're going to follow?
Emotional intelligence. Right? But emotional intelligence is 5 dimensions. Social awareness, self-awareness, social management, that's the one that I struggle with. Social management, so what am I doing with finding out that I hurt your feelings? And then motivation or optimism is the 5th one. I just see a lot of leaders that have either low self-awareness or lack of ability to go, oh crap, I just hurt somebody's feelings, right? And if we have good emotional intelligence, then typically we can navigate almost anything. I think the other one that I'm like, oh crap, we're missing that, is decision making. I see a lot of leaders, especially in today's work environment, that are really committed to collaboration or being relationship oriented, and that seems to be code for never makes a decision, which makes me frustrated, a lot frustrated. That I'm like, oh crap, we're missing that, is decision making. I see a lot of leaders, especially in today's work environment, that are really committed to collaboration or being relationship oriented, and that seems to be code for never makes a decision, which makes me frustrated,